My name is Olivia. I am 29 years old, and I will never forget the day my parents decided my wedding was too trivial to attend. Imagine hearing those words from the two people who raised you. Imagine standing in a small garden filled with flowers you had chosen, wearing a lace dress you loved, preparing to walk toward the man you wanted to spend your life with, and knowing your parents were on the other side of the world because they believed you were at the bottom. That phrase cut through me like glass, at the bottom. To them, my career as a wedding photographer was not respectable, not substantial, not worth celebrating. Yet here I was, the woman who had captured hundreds of brides walking proudly with their fathers, mothers, and entire families smiling behind them. Each time I clicked the shutter at those weddings, there was a bitter reminder inside me my parents would never give me that same joy. But let me rewind for a moment, because you need to understand how deep this wound really goes. I did not grow up in a broken household by appearance. We lived in a polished two-story home in Massachusetts, with white fences and perfectly trimmed lawns. From the outside, it was a picture of success. Inside, it was a monarchy. At the top sat my father Harold, a corporate lawyer, and my mother Eleanor, a hospital administrator. Just beneath them, shining like royalty, was my sister Julia, the golden child. And then there was me. The afterthought. I learned my place early. Julia's report cards filled with straight A's would be pinned to the refrigerator for weeks. When mine looked the same, I got a nod and a quick reminder that it was expected, not exceptional. Julia's acceptance to medical school was celebrated with a banquet. My graduation in fine arts ignored because my parents had a country club event that night. Even when my name appeared in a regional newspaper after winning a photography award, my mother's response was nice. But did you see Julia's article in the New England Journal of Medicine? Their priorities were crystal clear. Julia's accomplishments were milestones. Mine were distractions. And so when Noah proposed to me under a golden New England autumn sky, I hoped just once that my parents would see me, that they would show up, that they would sit in the front row of my garden ceremony smiling as I vowed to build a life with a man who loved me without conditions. But when I called them, their tone was cool, distracted, already busy. A fundraiser here, a conference there, Julia's schedule, the children's recital. My mother sighed and said, "We will see what we can do." I should have known then. On the day of my wedding, the chairs on my side of the aisle were half empty. My aunt and uncle came along with two cousins. Noah's family filled the rest, showering me with warmth that felt both comforting and heartbreaking. I had never wanted to cry while smiling so much. That night, while Noah was in the shower, I opened my phone, desperate for even a single message from my parents. There were none. Instead, I saw photos on social media. My parents, my sister, my brother-in-law, my niece and nephew, all in Hawaii. Sunlit beaches, smiling faces, captions like perfect family vacation with the people who matter most. The words froze my breath. The trip had been planned months ago, overlapping perfectly with my wedding day. They never intended to come. Their conflict was not a scheduling accident. It was a choice, a statement. And as I sat on that hotel bed in my wedding dress, staring at their photos, one truth became undeniable: I had never truly belonged to them. I had been tolerated, diminished, dismissed, but never cherished. That night, for the first time in my life, I whispered a promise to myself. I would stop begging for their approval. I would stop running after love that would never come. Still, that promise would be tested sooner than I could imagine. Because what came after the wedding, the loan, the betrayal, the confrontation would force me to stand taller than I ever had before. I wish I could tell you that the Hawaii discovery was the lowest point. But the truth is, it was only the beginning of a much bigger storm. Because when parents decide you are not worthy of their presence, it shapes how you see yourself. It tells you loudly that you are replaceable, that your choices are insignificant, and that wound does not heal overnight. After our wedding, I carried that pain everywhere. Every photograph I edited, every moment I captured for smiling families carried a shadow. My clients had fathers giving speeches, mothers crying tears of joy, siblings dancing together, I gave them memories they would treasure for decades. But deep inside, I knew my own family would never give me the same. You see, my parents never failed to remind me of my place. Julia lived only 3 blocks away from them. Every Sunday they had dinner together like clockwork. Her 2 perfect children called them Nana and Grandpa, and they attended every recital, every science fair, every small celebration. When I called to share good news, my mother always rushed off the phone with Julia. "Is here we're about to eat." It was always Julia's world. I was only a visitor. And yet I kept hoping. That is the cruelty of conditional love. You keep trying to earn it even when it is impossible. I worked harder. I built my photography studio, booking clients a year in advance. I poured everything into being not just successful, but undeniable. Still, when I introduced myself at family gatherings, my mother would say, "This is my younger daughter. She's still figuring things out." Those words cut deeper than she realized. I was almost 30. I owned a condo. I had employees. I had international awards. But in her eyes, I was still figuring things out. Then came Noah. He was the unexpected miracle. I met him while photographing a wedding. He was the best man. I remember watching him calm the groom's nerves, make children laugh, and help an elderly guest to her seat. I caught myself photographing him more than the bride and groom that day. And when he walked up to me with that easy smile saying, "So you're the one who sees everything," something in me cracked open. For the first time, someone noticed me, not as the disappointment, but as a person worth seeing. 6 months later, when I introduced Noah to my parents, my father barely shook his hand. My mother's first comment was, "Teachers are so underpaid." Noah squeezed my hand in the car afterward and said, "It's not about me. They just can't see you." He was right. But hearing him call me wonderful, when my parents never had, gave me strength I did not know I had been missing. That strength carried me to one of the biggest decisions of my life. When Noah proposed, he didn't do it with fireworks or elaborate setups. He knelt in the middle of a forest trail, leaves crunching beneath us, and asked me to choose him. I cried yes, because with him I felt enough. Entirely, completely enough. We planned a garden wedding, 70 guests, homemade invitations, flowers from local shops, a cake baked by a friend. It was not flashy, but it was authentic. It was us. And despite knowing my parents would likely not come, I still sent them invitations. I even wrote a personal note. It would mean the world to have you there. Weeks passed without a reply. By March, 3 months before the wedding, I decided to confront them in person. I sat in their pristine living room surrounded by walls of Julia's framed achievements. Only one small photo of me from high school graduation hung on the far corner like an afterthought. I asked if they were coming. My father looked at me as if I had asked for the moon. "Esther, let us be frank," he said. "Your sister is a surgeon. She saves lives. Your little garden ceremony is trivial." Trivial. The word echoed in my chest like a stone dropped in water. My mother smoothed her skirt and added, "We have the hospital fundraiser that month. Your father is being honored. Julia's children have recitals. You must understand." Understand what? That my life ranked below their social calendar. That my marriage was less meaningful than a fundraiser dinner. That my sister's family would always matter more. I held the teacup steady in my hand, but inside I was trembling. 30 years of trying to earn their approval crashed in that moment. I saw it clearly. They would never come. They had already decided I was less. When I left that house, I called Noah in tears. He listened quietly, then said words that saved me. "Then let me be your family. My parents already love you more than their own blood. You don't need theirs." And he was right. That realization was the beginning of my liberation. If you've ever had to face parents who made you feel invisible, you know this pain. Before I continue, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and if you believe stories like this matter, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the rest. Because what happened next will make you question what family really means. I was 20 years old when I first realized that my dream of photography would never be celebrated inside my parents' house. It started in high school the moment my art teacher handed me an old Nikon camera. I still remember pressing the shutter for the first time. The world froze inside the frame. I saw light, shadow, and emotion captured forever. It was like magic. Something inside me whispered, "This is what you are meant to do." But when I shared that passion at home, it was dismissed. My father, a man of rigid order and legal contracts, looked across the dining table and said, "Photography is not a real career. It is a hobby. You need something practical." My mother chimed in with her soft but cutting tone. Perhaps she could study business and take photography as a minor. At least she would have a fallback. They spoke about me as if I wasn't sitting there. I was the subject of a negotiation, not their daughter. That night I cried in my room staring at the Nikon on my desk. But even through the tears, I knew I couldn't let it go. Photography was the first thing that made me feel alive. So I compromised. I enrolled at a state university, double majoring in business and fine arts. The condition I had to keep a 3.5 GPA if I wanted their financial support. By day, I buried myself in business assignments. By night, I disappeared into the dark room watching images rise on paper like ghosts surfacing from shadows. On weekends, I shot small weddings for barely any pay, building a portfolio one couple at a time. I remember my roommate Olivia walking in at 3 a.m. I was surrounded by prints and half-finished essays. She shook her head. "Most people choose one thing to excel at. You're killing yourself trying to please everyone." She was right. But I was still clinging to the foolish hope that if I worked hard enough, my parents would finally be proud. That illusion shattered during my junior year. I won a prestigious regional award. The local newspaper featured me in a full-page spread with my photographs. I mailed the clipping home, my hands shaking with excitement. That evening, my mother called. Her voice was cool. "I saw your little article. It was nice. But did you see that Julia just published her research in the New England Journal of Medicine? We sent you the link last week." It was like being punched in the chest. I had already congratulated Julia with flowers. I had honored her achievement. Yet no one in my family even sent me a text to say good job. My victory was invisible. My talent, something I had fought to prove, meant nothing because it did not fit their definition of success. After graduation, I took a corporate job at a marketing firm, the kind of position my parents respected. It paid well, came with benefits, and made me look stable. But my soul wilted in those fluorescent offices. Every night I went home exhausted, only to stay up editing wedding photos until dawn. For 3 years, I lived like that, 2 full-time jobs, no free weekends, no vacations. Every penny I saved went into my dream. Finally, I built enough clients and enough savings to leave. I quit the firm and opened my own photography business. My father's reaction. He called it career suicide. "You're throwing away stability to chase a fantasy. Don't come crying to us when you fail." But I did not fail. Slowly, my reputation grew. I specialized in capturing authentic emotion rather than stiff-posed portraits. Couples booked me a year in advance. I hired 2 assistants. I bought a condo in the city. I even won international awards. I built something real with my own hands. And still at family gatherings, my mother would introduce me as my younger daughter, still figuring things out. Those words hurt more than the long nights of exhaustion, more than the sacrifices, more than the rejection letters. Because no matter how high I climbed in her eyes, I was still a child, fumbling in the dark. Looking back, that was the moment I began to separate my worth from their approval. I started to see that success was not about recognition from people who refused to look. It was about honoring what made me alive. And yet, despite that realization, I still longed for them to show up. I still hoped they might surprise me on my wedding day. But deep down, I already knew the truth. If you've ever pursued a dream your family didn't understand, you know the weight of proving yourself. What about you? Have you ever had to defend your passion against the people closest to you? Share your story in the comments. I would love to read them. So, by the time I turned 25, I was living 2 lives. On the surface, I was the dutiful daughter with a respectable job at a marketing firm, earning a paycheck that sounded solid enough to silence my parents' constant criticisms. Beneath that mask, I was the artist, The woman who spent weekends shooting weddings, editing until dawn, and pouring every dollar into equipment and savings for a dream no one in my family believed in. 3 years into that double life, I reached a breaking point. I had saved enough money, booked enough clients, and gathered enough courage to step away from the corporate grind. The day I quit, my chest felt lighter than it had in years. My father, however, nearly exploded over the phone. "You are throwing away stability to chase a pipe dream," he thundered. "Do not come crying to us when you fail." But failure never came. Success did. Slowly, steadily, it bloomed. I built a studio in the city. I focused on capturing authentic, unposed moments. Brides laughing mid-dance, children sneaking frosting from wedding cakes, grooms with tears on their cheeks as they whispered vows. My photographs were raw, imperfect, but real. Couples loved them. Word spread quickly. Within 2 years, my calendar was booked a full year in advance. I hired 2 assistant photographers. I bought a small condo, modest but mine. International competitions recognized my work. I had created something that was both art and business, something I could finally call a career. Yet my parents never acknowledged any of it. At family gatherings, my mother still introduced me as my younger daughter. She is still figuring things out. I remember standing at the buffet table once listening to her brag to a bridge club friend about Julia's latest surgery. Then, when pressed about me, she sighed and said, "Oh, Esther, she takes pictures. She has not settled yet." Settled. The word burned like acid. I owned a home. I ran a business. I employed people. But in her eyes, I was unsettled because I was not a surgeon, not a lawyer, not part of their carefully crafted dynasty. It was in the middle of this storm of dismissal that I met Noah. He appeared in my life while I was photographing another wedding. He was the best man, and I noticed him before anyone else. The way he calmed the nervous groom with a joke, how he guided an elderly guest gently to her seat, how he made restless children giggle instead of cry. My camera followed him almost instinctively. When the night ended, he approached me as I packed up my gear. "So you're the one who sees everything," he said with a smile. "That's my job," I answered, nervous without knowing why. "Well, I noticed you too," he replied, slipping his number into my hand. I laughed at the boldness, but my heart beat faster. Noah was nothing like the men my parents had paraded in front of me in the past, young lawyers at networking events, medical residents at Julia's fundraisers. He was a 4th-grade teacher. He lived modestly. But he spoke with passion about his students, about the power of helping each child find their strength instead of forcing them into boxes. It was exactly the opposite of how I had been raised. And for the first time, I felt seen. When I finally introduced him to my parents 6 months later, my father offered a stiff handshake. My mother raised her eyebrows and said, "Teachers are underpaid." On the drive home, Noah asked, "Why do they seem disappointed in me before even knowing me?" "It's not you," I explained. "It's anyone who isn't a doctor, lawyer, or CEO. That's their loss." He squeezed my hand and said something I will never forget. "Then they are missing out on a wonderful daughter." That moment I realized something powerful. I didn't need my parents to see me anymore. I had found someone who already did. Over the next few years, my business flourished, and so did my relationship with Noah. My parents remained cold, but Noah's parents embraced me as if I had always been theirs. They displayed my photographs in their home, asked thoughtful questions about my work, and never once suggested that Noah could have done better. Their warmth felt like oxygen after years of suffocation. Still, a small part of me hoped that maybe, just maybe, my parents would show up for the most important day of my life, my wedding. But when I called them to share the news of our engagement, my mother's voice was already distracted, preparing for another fundraiser. My father muttered about conferences. Julia's schedule was as always untouchable. They said they would see what they could do. That phrase haunted me. By the time I mailed the invitations, I already knew the answer. But I still wrote a note in my parents' card. It would mean the world to have you there. Weeks passed, no RSVP. And when I finally drove back to their house, stepping once again into that pristine living room filled with Julia's photographs, I sat across from my parents and asked directly. Their answer changed everything. Have you ever poured everything into building a life only to have it dismissed with a single word? Settled, trivial, unworthy. Let me know in the comments if you've been there. Your story matters. The day I walked back into my parents' house to confirm their attendance, I already sensed the answer. The walls looked the same, painted ivory filled with Julia's framed achievements, her white coat ceremony, her awards, her family portraits with smiling children. In the far corner, almost hidden, was a single picture of me from high school graduation. That was all. One tiny fragment of my life pushed to the edge like I was pushed out of theirs. My mother poured tea into delicate china cups, the kind she never used for her own children, only for guests. She smiled politely but without warmth. My father sat stiffly in his leather chair, posture perfect, face unreadable. I held my breath and asked the question that had been clawing at me for months. "Will you be coming to my wedding?" There was a pause. My mother stirred her tea too long, the spoon clinking against porcelain. Then she said, "We received your invitation, but I'm afraid we have a conflict." My heart pounded. What conflict? The date has been set for months. My father cleared his throat. "Your sister's family is visiting that weekend. We have already made plans." I blinked, stunned. Couldn't they come the weekend before or after? This is my wedding day. His expression hardened. "Esther, let us be frank. Julia is a busy surgeon with important responsibilities and limited vacation time. Her children have numerous activities. They cannot rearrange their entire schedule for what is frankly a trivial event for someone in your position." Trivial. The word slammed into me like a slap. My mother quickly stepped in, her voice smooth, as if she could soften the blow. "What your father means is that while this is important to you, Julia's obligations must take priority. She saves lives, dear." "And I just take pictures," I said flatly. "Precisely," my father replied, missing or ignoring the sting in my words. I set my cup down carefully, though my hands were shaking. "This is my wedding. I am your daughter, too." "Of course you are," my mother said with a tight smile. "But your little garden ceremony is hardly the event of the century. Perhaps if you had chosen a more substantial venue, or if Noah had a more established career, like a doctor," my father added unnecessarily. The silence that followed was suffocating. I realized in that moment that I had been chasing their approval my entire life, and it had never been mine to win. They had already decided who I was, the lesser child, the disappointment, the trivial one. When I left the house, I called Noah from the car. My voice broke as I told him everything. He listened quietly, then said words I will never forget. "Then let me be your family. My parents already love you more than their own blood." He was right. It was time to stop begging. It was time to choose myself. The months that followed were bittersweet. I finalized wedding details with Noah focusing on joy instead of disappointment. His parents stepped in with warmth, offering help at every step. My aunt and uncle promised to be there, filling a void my own parents had created. Slowly, I started to accept the truth. My wedding would not include the people who gave me life, but it would include the people who gave me love. And yet late at night I still found myself hoping they might change their minds, hoping they might see me finally as worthy. That hope was fragile, but it was there. Have you ever hoped for someone to show up in your life only to be disappointed over and over again? What did you do when that hope finally broke? Share your experience in the comments. I promise you're not alone in this. After that meeting, something inside me snapped into clarity. I had spent years twisting myself into knots, hoping my parents would finally see me, value me, love me the way they did Julia. But walking out of that house, past those walls filled with photos that excluded my life, I realized I had to stop. For my own survival, I had to stop. So I made a choice. My wedding would go on without them. It wasn't an easy decision. Every little girl dreams of walking down the aisle with her father by her side. Every bride imagines her mother helping with her veil, offering last-minute advice, whispering that she is beautiful. I wanted those moments more than I cared to admit. But when the reality is that your parents see your vows as trivial, you learn to let go. You learn to replace fantasy with truth. And the truth was, this Noah's family treated me like their own. His parents had welcomed me from the beginning, asking about my photography, hanging my work on their walls. His sister Laura designed our invitations by hand cream cards pressed with delicate flowers. His mother offered her grandmother's pearl earrings as my something borrowed. When I cried quietly over what I would not have, she hugged me and whispered, "We're so happy you're part of us." Even my Aunt Karen and Uncle Jack, who lived 6 hours away, promised to be there no matter what. "We wouldn't miss it for the world," Uncle Jack said. And I believed him. They had always shown up even when my parents didn't. So Noah and I poured ourselves into planning something that felt like us. We found a botanical garden that was affordable and breathtaking. We ordered food from a local caterer that specialized in simple, comforting dishes we both loved. A pastry chef friend gifted us a cake. My photography colleagues agreed to capture the day at a fraction of their usual rates. Every detail carried meaning, generosity, and authenticity. As the RSVPs rolled in, I noticed the imbalance. His family filled pages of our guest list. Mine remained painfully short, my aunt, my uncle, 2 cousins, and the blank space where my parents' names should have been. Noah noticed too. One night as we addressed envelopes at the kitchen table, he glanced at the small stack on my side. "Only 4 people," he asked gently. I nodded, my Aunt Karen, Uncle Jack, and 2 cousins. Plus, I sent one to my parents and Julia's family. But I doubt they'll come. "You should still invite them," he said softly. "Give them the chance to surprise you." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think they might show up, that maybe, just maybe, they would recognize what this meant. But deep down I knew. I had already heard their verdict trivial. Still, as June approached, I held onto a fragile thread of hope. I pictured them arriving late, but apologetic. I imagined my father straightening his tie and taking my arm. I imagined my mother wiping a tear as she saw me walk down the aisle. Those images haunted me because I knew they were illusions. What I didn't know then was that their absence would hurt, but it would also free me. Because when you stop begging for love where it doesn't exist, you begin to make space for the people who do love you. And those people filled my garden that day with more joy and warmth than I had ever felt in my life. Sometimes letting go of the family that breaks you is the only way to see the family that builds you. Tell me, have you ever had to create your own circle of love when your blood relatives refuse to show up? Share your thoughts below. June 12th arrived like a promise written in sunlight. The morning was bright, the air soft with the scent of blooming lilacs. I stood in the small preparation room at the botanical garden staring at myself in the mirror while my friend Zoe brushed a light blush across my cheeks. My dress was lace, vintage-inspired tea-length rather than floor-length, practical, but beautiful. It was me. Not a fantasy version, not what my parents would have approved of, but the truest version of myself. "How are you feeling?" Zoe asked, tilting her head as she adjusted my hair. "Mixed," I admitted. "Happy because I'm marrying Noah, sad because my parents aren't here, angry that I still care." Zoe smiled gently. "That's normal. But don't forget, this is their loss, not yours." Her words stuck with me as Noah's mother knocked and stepped inside. She carried a tiny velvet box. "Something borrowed," she said warmly. Inside were pearl earrings that had belonged to her grandmother, passed down through generations. "I wore them at my wedding. I'd like you to have them today." Tears pricked my eyes as she helped me fasten them. This was what a mother should be on her child's wedding day. Present, supportive, loving. For a moment, I felt the ache in my chest ease. When the ceremony began, Uncle Jack walked me down the aisle. His arm was steady, his expression proud. My Aunt Karen sat in the front row, smiling so widely it almost hurt to look at her. They were filling the roles my parents had abandoned, and somehow it was enough. The ceremony itself was everything I had dreamed of, simple, heartfelt, intimate. Noah's vows made people laugh and cry at once. Mine were quieter, but honest, promising him the same unconditional love he had always given me. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, the cheers from our 70 guests seemed to echo louder than any crowd I had ever known. During the reception, I noticed guests snapping photos with their phones, despite the professional photographers I had hired. Normally, this would irritate me. After all, people miss real moments when they hide behind screens. But that day, I didn't mind. These were not strangers chasing status. These were people who genuinely cared, wanting to hold on to joy. As the sun set, Noah found me sitting alone at one of the tables, taking a moment to breathe it all in. He slid into the chair beside me. Happy, he asked. Completely, I said, though I keep checking my phone. For what? Maybe they would send a text, even just congratulations. He took my hand steady and certain. Let's make a pact. This is the last time today we think about who isn't here. From now on, we focus only on who is here and who will be here for all our days ahead. He was right. I put my phone away. I danced until my feet ached. I laughed until my voice cracked. I felt surrounded by a love that didn't need conditions, titles, or achievements. For the first time in years, I felt whole. But that night in our hotel room, curiosity broke my promise. While Noah was in the shower, I checked my phone one more time. No messages from my parents, no missed calls. But when I opened social media, my heart froze. There they were, my parents, my sister, her husband, their children. On a Hawaiian beach, smiling broadly in the sun. The caption, perfect family vacation with the people who matter most. I scrolled horrified. Photos of them at breakfast overlooking the ocean, touring a pineapple plantation, toasting at a beachfront restaurant. The timestamps matched perfectly with my wedding day. They hadn't just skipped my wedding, they had planned an entirely separate family gathering to replace it. My blood ran cold. The conflict had never been real. The excuses had been rehearsed. They had chosen deliberately to erase me from their version of family. And in that moment, on what should have been the happiest night of my life, I felt the kind of betrayal that steals the air from your lungs. Have you ever discovered something that changed everything you thought you knew about your family? Keep watching, because what I uncovered next made the Hawaii betrayal look small in comparison, and it forced me into a choice that would change my life forever. I stared at those photos until my vision blurred. The glowing smiles of my parents, my sister Julia, her husband and their children were like a knife twisting deeper with every image. A beach picnic, a luxury dinner, a toast raised high to family. The caption read, "Family," as if I had never existed. When Noah came out of the shower, he found me sitting on the edge of the bed, phone clutched in my hands, tears streaking my makeup. He didn't need to ask what was wrong. One glance at the screen told him everything. "Oh, Olivia," he said softly, sitting beside me. He pulled the phone from my grip and set it on the nightstand. "I am so sorry." "They planned it," I whispered, choking on the words. This wasn't a conflict. This was a statement. They wanted me to see it. They wanted me to know I don't belong. He wrapped his arms around me, letting me sob into his chest. His shirt grew damp, but he didn't move. He just held me while I let years of disappointment pour out. Later, when I had calmed enough to breathe, I dialed my mother. She answered on the third ring, the sound of ocean waves and laughter in the background. "Olivia, is something wrong?" she asked lightly. "I saw your Hawaii posts," I said, my voice trembling but steady. "You planned a family vacation during my wedding." "Yes, well, as we told you, we had prior commitments," she replied smoothly. Julia could only get certain dates off, and the children had activities to work around. "You could have told me you were going to Hawaii," I pressed. "Instead, you made it sound like separate conflicts. You made me believe you might come." "Would that have made a difference?" she asked, her tone sharp. "The result would have been the same. We had more important obligations." "More important." The words hung between us like a verdict. I was less important than a luau. Less important than a beach trip. Less important than the illusion of a perfect family my parents had chosen to curate. "I need to go," she said briskly. "Your father is waiting for me. I hope your little ceremony went well." And then she hung up. I sat frozen, phone still pressed to my ear, heart hammering. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the casualness of it. My wedding, my vows, my happiness, all dismissed as little. Noah gently took the phone from my hands and powered it off. "No more tonight," he said firmly. "Tomorrow we start our honeymoon. They don't get to ruin this for us." He was right. I had spent years letting their rejection poison my joy. I couldn't let them take this too. So the next morning we left for Quebec. For 2 weeks we wandered cobblestone streets, ate croissants in sunlit cafes, and took photographs of old stone buildings bathed in golden light. I laughed more than I had in months. For the first time in years I felt free. free of their judgment, free of their cold eyes. It was just me, Noah, and the love we had chosen. But freedom is fragile. The moment we returned home, reality intruded. A week after our honeymoon, while I was shooting an engagement session in the public garden, my phone buzzed with call after call. When I finally checked, I saw 7 missed calls from my father. My stomach dropped. He never called me. The first voicemail was clipped but urgent. Olivia, call me immediately about the Madison property loan. The second came an hour later, his voice panicked. This is serious. The bank has been sending notices. Call me back. The third left just 20 minutes before was nearly frantic. The loan payments have not been made. They are threatening legal action. Call me right away. My body went cold. I knew exactly what he was talking about. 3 years earlier, back when I was still desperate for approval, my father had asked me to co-sign a loan on a commercial property. He told me it was a sure thing, just a formality for tax purposes. I had signed, foolishly grateful to be included in anything that resembled trust. Now it seemed that trust was about to destroy me. Have you ever learned in a single moment that your family's choices could ruin not just your heart, but your future? Stay with me, because what came next was the moment I finally decided to stop being their safety net. I finished the photo shoot in the public garden with my smile fixed in place, but inside I was unraveling. The moment my clients left, I collapsed onto a bench, pulled out my phone, and listened to those voicemails again. Each one was more desperate than the last. Each one a reminder that my name was tangled in something I barely understood. The Madison property loan. 3 years earlier, when I was still clinging to scraps of hope that my father might finally respect me, he had asked me to co-sign a loan. It's just a formality, he had assured me across the dining room table. Helps with taxes. I'll handle everything, payments, management, all of it. You won't have to worry about a thing. I had been naive, hungry for recognition, I signed. And now here I was, sitting in a public park, realizing that a single signature could shatter everything I had built my business, my credit, my future with Noah. I called my father. He answered on the first ring, voice tight. Finally. Where have you been? This is an emergency. I was working, I said, forcing calm. What's going on with the Madison loan? The management company is incompetent, he snapped. The building's half empty. Rental income hasn't covered the payments. But you've been paying anyway, right? I asked already, knowing the answer from the panic in his voice. There was a pause. With the Hawaii expenses and Julia's kids' tuition, there were temporary cash flow issues. I assumed rent would cover it. How many payments have been missed? 3, he admitted. The bank sent notices, but they went to the building address. I only found out yesterday when they called me directly. 3 missed payments, my name on the loan. My credit carefully built while growing my business, now under threat. I need you to transfer $40,000 to cover the missed payments and penalties, he said firmly, as if giving a courtroom order. Once that's cleared, we can restructure. I nearly laughed at the audacity. Dad, I just paid for a wedding and honeymoon. I don't have $40,000 lying around. You're a business owner, he pressed. This is a family emergency. Your credit is at stake, too. The irony nearly knocked the breath out of me. My wedding had been a trivial event not worth his time, but my bank account was suddenly family property. I need time to figure this out, I said. This cannot wait, he barked. The bank is threatening foreclosure by the end of the week. Then it's already waited too long, I replied, and I hung up. That night I spread documents across our kitchen table with Noah by my side. I called a lawyer friend who specialized in real estate. I spoke with a financial advisor. The picture grew darker with each conversation. My father had not missed 3 payments. He had missed 5. The reserve fund he promised existed was gone. The bank was within its rights to demand immediate repayment. My credit score had already dropped nearly 100 points. If the property went into foreclosure, both my name and his would be dragged through mud. I rubbed my temples, staring at the numbers. I can't believe he let it get this bad. And the timing right after they skipped our wedding for Hawaii. It feels like more than coincidence. Noah placed his hand over mine. The question isn't what he did. The question is what you're going to do now. I stared at him, my chest heavy with fear and anger. For years I had been their backup plan. Their afterthought at holidays, but their safety net in crises. It was a pattern as old as my childhood, my needs invisible, my resources always available. This time, though, it felt different. This time, I had something worth protecting: my business, my marriage, my future. And maybe it was time to stop being their insurance policy. So, what about you? Have you ever been pressured into saving someone who never showed up for you? How did you handle it? Share your story in the comments. I read every single one, and I know others here need to hear they're not alone. So, the next morning, I woke up with a pit in my stomach and a decision forming in my mind. I wasn't going to hand over money blindly. Not this time. For once, I needed to know the full truth. So I gathered every scrap of paperwork I had from the Madison loan, called our financial advisor, and asked for a complete history of the property. When she slid the file across her desk later that afternoon, my chest tightened. Page after page told a story far different from the one my father had painted. The Madison property had never been fully occupied. Vacancies plagued it from the beginning. Rental income had been unstable, yet every time money trickled in, my father withdrew it almost immediately. Instead of building a reserve fund, like he claimed, he drained it for other expenses. And then I saw the dates. The payments stopped, right around the same time he booked the Hawaii trip. I sat back, cold clarity washing over me. The cash flow issues he blamed on the management company weren't bad luck. They were his choices. He had prioritized luxury over responsibility, appearances over integrity. He had sacrificed my credit, my future, to sip cocktails on a beach with the family who already had everything. This looks like robbing Peter to pay Paul, my advisor said bluntly. Except in this case, you're Peter. Her words sank like a stone. I left her office trembling with a mix of rage and betrayal. It wasn't just financial mismanagement. It was a deliberate choice to let me carry the risk while he spent freely, confident I would bail him out. That evening I called him again. Noah sat beside me, his hand gripping mine, steady and silent. I've reviewed the records. I began, keeping my voice calm. There was a sharp intake of breath. How did you access those? He demanded. I'm a cosigner, Dad. I have a legal right. Why did you stop paying the exact month you booked Hawaii? That is entirely unrelated, he said quickly, his voice rising. Irrelevant. Have you arranged the transfer to cover the missed payments? No, I said simply. What do you mean, no? His voice cracked with anger. This affects your credit, too. You need to be reasonable. I am being reasonable. I've spoken with advisors and lawyers. I'm determining the most reasonable course of action. And what is that? He snapped. I'll tell you tomorrow, I said, and I hung up before he could respond. Noah looked at me with concern. Are you sure you want to play it this way? Yes, I nodded. My heart pounded, but my resolve hardened. For once, I'm going to treat them exactly the way they've treated me. That night, I didn't sleep much. Instead, I spread the documents across the table, scribbled notes, highlighted dates. Every line I read was another nail in the coffin of trust. My parents had always demanded obedience, but never offered respect. They had dismissed my career, belittled my wedding, erased me from family photos. And now they expected me to sacrifice everything to fix the mess they created. By dawn, the fear had shifted into something sharper: determination. I spent the day consulting with my lawyer, a credit repair specialist, and even a real estate agent to understand the property's true market value. What emerged was staggering. My parents were not the picture of stability they projected. They were overextended. They had borrowed against their home to fund Julia's house. They were paying exorbitant private school tuition for her children. They maintained memberships at 2 exclusive clubs that drained thousands each year. And my father's law practice. It was losing ground to younger tech-savvy competitors. The Hawaii trip hadn't been a splurge from abundance. It had been financed by ignoring loan payments, by gambling with my future. When the phone rang that evening, I was ready. Tell me you have the money, my father said without greeting. I don't, I answered steady. This is no time for petty revenge because we missed your wedding. This is a financial emergency. I felt something shift inside me. Do not contact me about trivial matters, I said, repeating the exact words my mother had used to describe my wedding. There was silence, then disbelief. What did you just say? Trivial matters, I repeated, calm and cold, like loan payments, like credit scores. Trivial compared to the important things in life. Wouldn't you agree? He sputtered with outrage. This is outrageous. Your mother and I raised you better than this. We gave you everything. No, I said. You gave Julia everything. You gave me conditions. You gave me contempt. And when I needed you most, you gave me Hawaii. For the first time in my life, I felt the weight of their judgment lift. I was no longer their scapegoat. I was no longer their safety net. I was free. Have you ever had to make the brutal choice to stop saving people who never saved you? Tell me in the comments, because what I did next was not just a refusal, it was a strategy, and it changed everything. The night after that call, I sat at the kitchen table with Noah, surrounded by stacks of paperwork. Every page was proof that my parents had gambled with my future, assuming I would swoop in and rescue them. I wasn't going to, not this time. For once I was going to fight for myself. I started with my lawyer. She explained that as a co-signer I was on the hook, but I still had options. If I documented the mismanagement and acted quickly, I could limit the damage to my credit and potentially negotiate my way out of the loan. It would require persistence paperwork and a willingness to stare my parents' mess straight in the face. Next, I spoke to a credit repair specialist. He confirmed what I feared: my credit score had already dropped nearly 100 points. That could affect everything from refinancing my condo to interest rates on credit cards. But he also gave me hope. If you handle this proactively and document why much of the damage can be reversed in a year, he said. A year felt like forever, but it was better than a lifetime. Finally, I met with a real estate agent to determine the true market value of the Madison property. My father had always claimed it was a sure thing worth far more than the loan. The agent laughed bitterly when she pulled the comps. This property has been overpriced since day one, she said. If it sells, it will be at a loss. By the end of the day, I had a clear picture. My parents weren't wealthy pillars of stability. They were overextended, reckless, and desperate to maintain the illusion of status. The Madison property was just one crack in a facade full of them. They had taken out a second mortgage on their home for Julia's house, paid private school tuition they couldn't afford, and financed club memberships that bled them dry. The Hawaii trip had been the final straw, a vacation funded by neglecting a loan tied to my name. When my father called again, his voice sharp with urgency, I was ready. Have you arranged the transfer? He demanded. No, I said evenly, and I won't. What do you mean you won't? His voice rose in disbelief. This will ruin us. No, Dad, I corrected. This will ruin you. I've already spoken to the bank. I have options to protect myself. What options? He barked. That's not your concern, I replied. Just like my wedding wasn't yours. He sputtered with rage. You cannot do this to us. We are your parents. We gave you everything. You gave me judgment, I said, my voice steady. You gave me absence. You gave me the word trivial on the most important day of my life. And now you want $40,000 as if I'm your safety net. I'm done. There was silence, the kind that crackles with shock. For the first time, I realized my father wasn't angry because he thought I was wrong. He was angry because he knew I was right. After I hung up, Noah wrapped his arm around me. How do you feel? He asked quietly. Lighter, I admitted. Like I just put down something I've been carrying my entire life. That night, I emailed my lawyer to move forward with negotiations. The plan was bold. I would offer the bank a lien against my share of any future inheritance in exchange for removing my name from the loan. It was unconventional, but it protected me. If my parents wanted to keep their empire afloat, they would have to do it without dragging me under. As I pressed send, I thought about the irony. My parents had spent years teaching me that success meant control status and appearances. But real strength, I realized, was something they had never mastered. Setting boundaries, saying no, and refusing to be diminished. For the first time, I wasn't their daughter begging for love. I was a woman protecting her life. What about you? Have you ever reached the point where saying no was the only way to survive? Tell me below. I know others watching this need to hear how you found your strength. 24 hours after sending that email to my lawyer, I knew there was no turning back. I was done being my parents' silent insurance policy. I was done paying the price for their obsession with appearances. And yet I also knew that by standing my ground, I had lit a fire that would spread through every corner of my family. The fallout came swiftly. My phone buzzed nonstop the next day, texts, voicemails, even emails from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Word had spread, and my parents wasted no time telling everyone their version of the story. My Aunt Sophia sent a message dripping with disappointment. "I can't believe you abandoned your father in his time of need." My cousin Robert, who had always orbited Julia's world, left a voicemail calling me childish and vindictive. Even my grandmother, who had usually stayed neutral, phoned to ask, "Did you really refuse to help your poor father with a temporary setback?" Temporary setback. That was what they called years of mismanagement, a Hawaiian vacation bought with skipped payments, and the threat of foreclosure hanging over my head. Not one of them mentioned the wedding. Not one of them asked why my parents had chosen a luau over their daughter's vows. To them, the narrative was simple. I was the ungrateful daughter who turned her back on family loyalty. 3 days later, Julia herself called. I nearly let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. "You need to fix this," she snapped the moment I answered. "Dad is a mess. Mom hasn't stopped crying." I took a deep breath. "Hello to you too, Julia. How was Hawaii?" Her silence was sharp enough to cut. "Is that what this is about? You're punishing them because they missed your wedding. Grow up, Olivia. Life is not all about you." The irony of that line almost made me laugh. Julia, the sun around which our entire family revolved, was telling me not to be self-centered. "This isn't about punishment," I said calmly. "This is about boundaries." Dad made financial decisions that tied my name to a loan without responsibility. Then he missed payments right when he was booking flights for your perfect little trip. And now he expects me to throw in $40,000 as if it's my duty. I'm not doing it. "You've always been jealous," she said, her voice rising. "Jealous of my success, my family, my relationship with Mom and Dad. This is just another tantrum for attention." I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tightly. "Julia, I'm not jealous. I chose a different path, one that makes me happy. All I ever wanted was basic respect. And when I asked for that on the most important day of my life, none of you showed up. That's not jealousy, that's grief. And I'm done pretending otherwise." There was a pause. I pushed further. "Do you even know how Dad funded that Hawaii trip? Ask him for the bank statements. Look at when the loan payments stopped. Then tell me if this is really about me or about his choices." Her voice faltered for the first time. "I have to go. The kids need dinner," and she hung up. Julia retreated into silence after that. She didn't defend me to our parents, but she didn't keep attacking either. It was easier for her to disappear than confront the truth. But not everyone stayed silent. My Aunt Karen, the same woman who had walked me down the aisle, called and said, "I'm proud of you. Your mother has played favorites your whole life. It's about time someone told her no." My cousin Danielle, who had distanced herself from family years earlier, sent a text, "Welcome to the other side. It's lonely sometimes, but healthier. Call me if you need to talk." Even my Uncle Peter, who rarely involved himself in anything, emailed to say he admired the independence I had carved out. Their voices were small, but they mattered. They reminded me that I wasn't crazy, that setting boundaries wasn't cruelty, it was survival. And with Noah by my side reminding me daily that I was worth more than their approval, I began to feel stronger. I wasn't just refusing to pay $40,000. I was refusing to live a life where my worth was defined by people who called my wedding trivial. Still deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. My parents weren't used to being told no. They weren't used to consequences. And something told me they wouldn't go down quietly. But sometimes the real storm comes after the first no. What happened next tested me in ways I never imagined and revealed a twist that changed the balance of power in my family forever. Stay with me. The storm truly began after Julia's call. The first wave was the barrage of messages from extended relatives, each one echoing my parents' narrative. I was selfish, I was cold, I had turned my back on family. The second wave was the silence, the friends of the family, who stopped replying to my emails, the cousins who unfriended me online, the invitations to gatherings that never arrived. My parents had crafted their version of events so well that to many I was the villain. At first, the isolation cut deep. I lay awake at night wondering if I had gone too far. The word ungrateful echoed in my head, planted there by relatives who never once asked about my side of the story. I wanted to scream, "Where were you on my wedding day? Where were you when they called my vows trivial? Where were you when I cried myself to sleep because my family erased me?" But amid the noise, a few voices broke through like lifelines. Aunt Karen called one evening, her voice steady with conviction. "Don't let them break you. Your mother has always worshipped Julia, and you've always been treated as less. This isn't your fault, it's theirs. You're stronger than they ever gave you credit for." Her words filled me with a warmth that eased the sting of betrayal. My cousin Danielle, who had long kept her distance from family gatherings, sent me a simple but powerful text. "Welcome to the side where peace begins. It's lonely at first, but it gets better. Call me anytime." Even my Uncle Peter, a man of few words, wrote in an email, "I don't take sides, but I admire what you've built for yourself. Independence is rare in this family. Hold on to it." Those small affirmations became anchors. They reminded me that standing up for myself was not cruelty, but courage. Through it all, Noah was my rock. He never once told me to bend for peace, never once suggested I give in to the guilt trip. Instead, he sat with me night after night, helping me organize every email, every voicemail, every piece of evidence. "This isn't about revenge," he reminded me. "It's about requiring the same respect you give them. That's not harsh. That's healthy." Slowly, I began to reclaim my power. I threw myself into work expanding my photography studio. I added another associate photographer, rented a larger space, and opened a small gallery. Clients admired my style, real, raw, honest, and business thrived. For the first time, I could look at myself in the mirror and see not the child they dismissed, but the woman I had become. Noah's career blossomed too. He was promoted to lead teacher at his school, developing a new curriculum that made national headlines. We renovated our apartment, creating a space that felt entirely ours. We built friendships with other couples who celebrated our victories instead of competing. Our home became the kind of environment I had always craved, one where achievements were honored, regardless of profession, where mistakes were met with encouragement, not scorn. And while my parents tried to cast me as the ungrateful daughter, their campaign of blame slowly began to crack. A few relatives reached out quietly, curious about my side of the story. One asked, "Is it true you refused to help them after they missed your wedding?" My answer was simple, yes. Because helping them meant sacrificing everything I've worked for right after they proved my life was meaningless to them. Silence followed, but sometimes silence is understanding. By the time 6 months had passed, the bank confirmed my name had been removed from the Madison loan. My father had found the money somewhere, maybe from friends, maybe from selling other assets, but he never told me. My credit, though bruised, was healing. My life was intact, stronger, even because I had chosen myself. Yet the war wasn't over. My parents, for all their pride, could not stand the fact that I had defied them and survived. They had always held power over me with disapproval, but now that power was slipping. And I knew sooner or later they would try to reclaim it. So, have you ever stood your ground against family only to watch them twist the story until you looked like the villain? How did you handle the loneliness that followed? Share your experience. I promise someone else here needs to hear it. It was March when the phone call came. Uncle Jack Steadykind, Uncle Jack, the man who had walked me down the aisle when my own father refused, had died of a sudden heart attack. The grief was sharp, immediate, and complicated. I loved him, and I owed him more than I could ever repay. But attending his funeral meant stepping back into the lion's den, facing my parents and Julia, for the first time since the confrontation over the loan. Noah booked us flights to Chicago, and we decided to stay at a hotel rather than with relatives. "It's better if you have your own space," he said gently. He was right. I needed distance. The service was packed, a testament to the life my uncle had built. Friends, colleagues, neighbors all gathered to honor him. When my parents arrived, I almost didn't recognize them. My father's hair was completely gray, his shoulders slightly hunched. My mother looked thinner, her face lined in ways I hadn't seen before. They nodded stiffly when they saw me, but made no move to speak. Julia, flawless as ever, sat beside them in the front row, her family clustered around her like a protective shield. Noah and I chose seats several rows back with Aunt Karen, whose presence was a balm in the middle of the tension. After the service, there was a reception at Karen's house. I busied myself in the kitchen arranging food trays and helping where I could when my mother walked in. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us felt fragile, stretched thin by years of silence and words left unsaid. Finally, she cleared her throat. "Your photography business seems to be doing well," she said, avoiding my eyes. "I saw the magazine feature." Her acknowledgement startled me. "Yes," I said cautiously. "It's been a good year." She nodded, rearranging cookies on a tray that didn't need rearranging. "Your father and I are selling the house. Too big for just the two of us now." "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied, not sure what response she wanted. "We found a condo closer to Julia's family, smaller but adequate for our needs." I understood the subtext. They were downsizing, forced to confront the financial strain they had tried so hard to hide. I said nothing. Then she added quietly, "The Madison property sold last month. Not for what your father hoped, but enough to clear the loan." Relief flickered through me, tempered with something like pity. "I'm glad it worked out," I said sincerely, and I meant it. Despite everything, I had never wished for their ruin. We stood in silence, the weight of years pressing down on us. Finally, she straightened her shoulders in that familiar way that signaled a decision. "Your father and I may have been hasty in our assessment of your wedding," she said carefully. "We regret missing it." It wasn't an apology, not fully, but it was the first acknowledgement, however small, that they might have been wrong. "Thank you for saying that," I replied. My throat tightened, but my voice was steady. "It means something to hear it." Another pause. Then she added, "Noah seems like a good man." "The best," I said firmly. "He makes me very happy." She nodded once decisively before lifting the tray of cookies. "I should get these out to the guests." It was less than 5 minutes, but it felt like a crack in the wall we had built between us. Not reconciliation, not forgiveness, but the faintest possibility of something different. Later that evening, as Noah and I sat in our hotel room, he asked, "How do you feel about what she said?" I thought for a long time before answering, conflicted. Part of me wants to believe her. Part of me thinks it was just words, a way to save face. But it's more than I expected. He squeezed my hand. "Then take it as a start, not a finish, just a start." For the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine a future where my parents and I might find some common ground. Not the fantasy of unconditional love I had chased for so long, but a fragile truth built on honesty. Still deep down, I knew the real test was yet to come. Life has a way of testing boundaries just when you think you found peace, and that test arrived sooner than I expected. Sometimes the first crack in a wall is all it takes to let light in, but light can also reveal everything you tried not to see. And when my parents learned I was pregnant, that fragile peace was tested in ways I never imagined. Stay with me. 2 months after the funeral, I stared at a thin white stick in my hand and felt my world tilt. A faint pink line appeared soft but undeniable. I was pregnant. I walked into the living room where Noah was grading papers at the table. My voice trembled as I whispered, "We're having a baby." He looked up, eyes wide, and then he swept me into his arms, spinning me around like we were children. His laughter filled the apartment. "You've just given me the greatest gift of my life." The weeks that followed felt like a dream. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about my parents or their approval. I was thinking about the life growing inside me, about the kind of mother I wanted to be. I journaled every night, pouring out promises that my child would never have to earn my love, that they would always know they were enough. When the time came to share the news, we told Noah's parents in person. His mother burst into tears and immediately began knitting a tiny blanket. His father hugged me so tightly, I could barely breathe, whispering, "You're going to be an incredible mother." Their joy was pure, unfiltered, exactly what I needed. Calling my parents was harder. I braced myself for indifference, maybe even criticism. But when my mother answered and I said I'm due December 15th, there was a gasp. genuine, unguarded. "A baby," she said. "Oh, Olivia, that's wonderful news." For the first time in years, her voice carried warmth. She asked questions about my health, about how I was feeling, even about Noah's reaction. It wasn't much, but it was more than I had ever expected. Before we hung up, she hesitated. "Your father and I would like to visit after the baby comes, if that would be all right." I froze, my emotions warring inside me. Fear, hope, doubt. The idea of my parents holding my child made my stomach twist, but the thought of them showing up even tentatively was something I had craved my whole life. "Let's plan for that once she arrives," I said carefully. "I'll let you know when we're ready." To my shock, she agreed. "We can wait," she said softly. Those 3 words hit me harder than any accusation ever had. My parents had never waited for me. They had always demanded, commanded, expected. "We can wait" felt like a shift. Small, but real. The months passed quickly. Pregnancy changed me in ways I hadn't imagined. I reflected on my own childhood, dissecting which patterns I wanted to break and which values I wanted to keep. My therapist helped me see clearly love isn't something you prove, it's something you give. That single truth became my mantra. When our daughter Lily was born, everything else faded. The moment they placed her on my chest, I felt love so fierce it shook me. Noah held her, next tears streaming down his face as he whispered promises into her tiny ears. We had created something no rejection, no dismissal, no trivial label could ever diminish. 2 weeks later, I invited my parents to visit. They arrived with gifts, a music box, a set of children's books, even a silver bracelet my mother said had been hers as a baby. When my father held Lily, something in him softened. He rocked her gently, whispering nonsense words that made her stop fussing. My mother touched her tiny fingers and said, "She has your eyes." It wasn't perfect. Old wounds don't heal overnight. But in that moment, I saw the possibility of a different story, not just for me, but for my daughter. Because the truth is, I no longer need their approval. I have my own family now, one built on unconditional love, respect, and presence. Still, I can't ignore the irony. The baby they once might have called a distraction became the bridge that softened their hearts. And maybe that's the twist I never saw coming. Family isn't just the people you're born to. It's the people who show up, who love you without conditions, who stay. If you've ever struggled with family rejection, remember this. You can build your own circle. And sometimes the ones who failed you may surprise you later. If you want to hear another story about boundaries, betrayal, and unexpected redemption, don't stop here. Click to watch the next video. It might just change the way you see your own family. When I look back now, it's hard to believe how far I've come. There was a time when every choice I made was shadowed by the weight of my parents' disappointment. Every accomplishment felt smaller under their silence, every milestone dismissed as trivial. For years, I thought if I worked harder, smiled brighter, achieved more, I could earn what I longed for: unconditional love. But Lily changed everything. The moment I held her, I understood what love was meant to feel like. It wasn't conditional. It wasn't measured against someone else's standard. It wasn't withheld to control or punish. It was fierce, immediate, and complete. She didn't have to do anything to deserve it. She just had to exist. And that realization freed me in ways I never imagined. Noah and I have built a home where laughter fills the walls and where achievements, big or small, are celebrated. A home where mistakes aren't met with ridicule, but with encouragement. A home where love is never used as leverage. It's not perfect, but it's real, and it's ours. My parents remain part of our lives in a limited, cautious way. The wounds don't disappear, but I've learned something vital. Reconciliation doesn't always mean returning to what was. Sometimes it means creating new boundaries, new definitions, new expectations. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no to what hurts you so you can say yes to what heals you. If there's one lesson my story offers, it's this. Your worth is not earned through someone else's approval. It's already yours. And the family that truly matters is the one that sees it, honors it, and chooses you every single day. That I've learned is more powerful than any apology could ever be.